Did you know there's a turtle, yes, a turtle, worth $100 million? We talked to Terry Fator today on a special extended edition of
Ventriloquism Weekly.
Good afternoon, evening, or whatever it may be, wherever you may be. I'm Matt Bailey, and it is 6 p.m. Eastern on this Monday, August 5th, 2013, and an historic day for Ventriloquism Weekly. Let me tell you, you guys are in for a real treat with one of the nicest guys in Vent. I did this interview this past Wednesday, and it has felt like 3 weeks. Let me tell you, I have been so excited to bring this to you. And we're going to start off with some statistics. 2 of the spots in the top 5 on the Forbes list of highest earning comedians are held by ventriloquists. One of them is surpassed only by Jerry Seinfeld, and this gentleman lands solidly in the number 2 spot with annual earnings of approximately $24 million. And he is with us this week. And so I am proud, honored, excited, and a whole bunch of other things to welcome this gentleman to the program. This is fantastic. I'm not going to keep you guys waiting any longer. Here is singer, impressionist, and of course, ventriloquist, Mr. Terry Fator. Welcome to the program. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a delight to talk to you.
Wonderful. I always like to begin at the beginning with my guests, and I just was wondering what drew you to the art form of ventriloquism. What about it really sparked your interest?
It's kind of an accident for me. And it's amazing since I've had the kind of success that I've had. It's amazing to me how many people told me that when they were kids, they had a ventriloquist dummy and they tried to do it. It's really one of those things I think that is very appealing to children because, well, I mean, it's just kind of interesting to think of making an inanimate object talk. And so just like anybody else, I mean, I kind of accidentally came across a book in my school library. And at the time I dabbled in doing, magic tricks and other things. I knew I wanted to be an entertainer. I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And when I was 10, I found this book. And it just fascinated me. I thought it sounded like a lot of fun. And unlike so many others who try, I found that I had the gift pretty quickly. I mean, and within just a couple of days, I could talk without moving my lips and realize that I could do it. And so so it was kind of an accident for me. And then, of course, I got fascinated by all the famous ventriloquists. I was able to find now this was back in the 70s. So I was able to find record albums and cassette tapes of Jimmy Nelson, Paul Winchell, Edgar Bergen, Sherry Lewis, things like that. And so those were the people that I say mentored me in a sense that through their audio cassettes and records.
Were you ever able to, or did you ever reach out to any of the events of that time and try to begin a correspondence with them?
No, I never did, and that's very unfortunate to me, because Paul Winchell passed away just really almost just at the same time when I was just hitting it. And that was just so sad to me. I did get to meet Jimmy Nelson, and I've become friends with Jimmy and his wife Betty, and it's been phenomenal to be able to be friends with someone who had such a monumental impact on my life. People like Clinton Detweiler, who ran the news events and the Mayor Ventriloquist Studios. And I never knew Clinton. I met him one time. I didn't fly them because they don't fly, but he and his wife Adelia, I actually paid to have them come to the Mirage for my second anniversary, and I was able to meet them, and it was an amazing experience because even though we had never met just through his work with the Mayor Ventriloquist Studios, I considered him a major impact on my life and a major mentor for me. So of course, when he passed away earlier this year, it was just devastating because I was so looking forward to honoring him at the ventriloquist convention. But and then of course at the time, there were a lot of ventriloquists on the air, people like Jay Johnson, when I was a kid. My parents wouldn't let me watch the show soap, but every time the ventriloquist came on, they would let me come into the room and watch him. They'd be like, Terry, come here. So I would watch it just so I could see him do his ventriloquism. And then, of course, Willie Tyler and Lester and And now Sherry Lewis's daughter reached out to me, and so did Paul Winchell's daughter. They both reached out to me after I won America's Got Talent, and wonderfully, April Winchell gave me some memorabilia from Paul that I now have in my dressing room in Las Vegas. So
That's great. And so off of that, I mean, what does it feel like for you to now to be that person for this generation of ventriloquists?
well, it's kind of surreal. I mean, it's just different, and what's so interesting about it is that it was all new and exciting for a couple of years, and man, it was like I'm in Las Vegas, and if anybody comes to Las Vegas, there's billboards and taxi cabs, and pretty much you can't go anywhere without seeing Terry Fator, my name. And that was all very, very novel for a couple of years, and now it's just kind of, if I don't really notice it, I don't really care or notice it. I'm so focused on my family life and my family, but it is very surreal to have become one of those that hopefully is being a mentor through my act and my abilities in the same way that these other people were toward me. I want to. I always want to make sure that I'm open for ventriloquists, and I have a standing order to my team that if a ventriloquist ever comes to the show, if they contact me, I want to make sure that I bring them backstage and say hi to them, because I feel like it's very important to make sure that they get a chance to say hello, and I get a chance to meet them. I'm very interested in the ventriloquism community. I'm just so busy, I don't have time. Unfortunately, I can't go to the full conventions. I was able to spend one day there this year, but it's just I work over 200 shows a year at the Mirage and traveling around, so it's just I just don't have a lot of time. But I hope I can have the same kind of impact on other events and on the new generation that people like Edgar Bergen, Jimmy Nelson, and Paul Winchell and Sherry Lewis had on me, for sure.
I can assure you from this end of things that you are. I mean, your lecture, the lines were forming outside at least an hour before your lecture. I mean, people are really interested in what you have to say because of how unique your story is. And so, I asked earlier about, what got you interested. Do you have any stories from when you were just starting out? Any, like a first show type of recollection, so that maybe parallels could be drawn between where some people are and where you were when you were just starting out?
Yeah, my first shows, again, it goes back to Clinton Detweiler. I was able, and it's weird because my mom was the one who found all this out, and I don't know how in the world she did, because without the internet, how do you even find out about the Mayor Ventriloquist Studios? My mom was very, very supportive of me, and my mom somehow found the Mayor Ventriloquist Studios. I joined the news events, and then I remember my mother and I. My dad was never supportive. My dad was always a very difficult person. He never did anything but criticize me. But my mom would and I would sit and look at the catalogs, and we would decide what dialogue books. And so what I would do is I would order as many dialogue books as I could afford. We never had much money, but I was able to scrape up enough to maybe order 10 books. And I think they were like $2 a piece or $2.50 a piece, and then order those books. And what I would do is I would go through them and I would pick all of my favorite jokes. Instead, I would never learn a whole routine straight. I would pick my favorite jokes, and then I would cut and paste them into my own routine that I would do. And man, I did that routine that I had taken from these dialogue books using all my favorite jokes. I did that until I was in college, before I started writing my own material. I was terrified to write my own material. I tried it, and I didn't get laughs, and people didn't like it. So, and then of course my dad told me that I wasn't a writer and I couldn't write, so I just stick to the dialogue books, and that paralyzed me as far as my ability to write. And it wasn't until I was maybe in college or even after college that I started kind of playing around with writing, which is interesting because the writing seminar that I did, the writing workshop that I did at the event convention, it is how I first started to write. What I did was I got my funny friends around, and we would sit, and I would say, okay, I want to write a routine for this character. And we would all just sit and bounce ideas around. And that's really how I came up with that. And then when I found out that's how all of the big writers, the big comedians like, Dave Letterman and Johnny Carson, they all had teams of writers. And of course, watching the Dick Van Dyke Show was a big influence on me as well, because they are comedy writers, and it shows them in an office bouncing ideas around. And so it was there that I realized that's the best way to write your own personal material. But I would just do these little shows for birthday parties and for church. I tried to get schools that performances at any church or school that I could. And this is, when I was 10, 11, 12 years old. I just wanted to continue to perform and to do things. And I had two routines. I had one that was not religious, that I would perform like if I was doing a school show or the VFW or something. And then I would have my religious routines where I had cut and pasted from all of the religious routine books, where it was telling the story of Jonah or Moses or something with jokes. And I would do those at churches. And I didn't get paid much. I think it was like $20 or $25 a show. And then occasionally I would perform at a church, and then they would take a collection to help me try to raise money for new puppets and things like that. And I just started like pretty much, I think any other event would.
Yeah. And then you tell a story in your road show, which, by the way, we all saw, all the vents who were at convention saw at the Taft Theater, and it was just fantastic. Really, really good job. We really enjoyed it. And you talk
Thank
about
you.
in that show. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. But the we really enjoyed it, and one of the things you talk about is Walter Airedale being that first character, that first professional character that you have. So I was wondering if you might be able to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, my mom had started saving, and I think I tell this story. I told the story in the road show that my mother started saving her money, and she saved. It took her 3 years, and she actually talked to, and believe it was, oh gosh, from my mind has gone blank, but it was a very popular figure maker back in the 70s, and she talked to him and actually called him. I want to say it was Craig Lovick, but I don't think it was. No, Chuck Jackson. It was Chuck Jackson, and she called him up. I have these catalogs, and she said, "Listen, there's no way I can afford a professional figure. I just can't. But do you have any kind of, seconds that maybe you're not happy with, or that you might be willing to sell me at a discount?" And at first he said no, and then he said, "You know what? Actually, I do. I've got this little character that I've set. He's an original. He's not available to anybody else. I'd made him, but I'm just not happy with how he looks. And he's been sitting here for a couple of years, and I'll sell him to you for a discount." And I don't even know how much it was. Maybe it was $500. But he had winkers, blinkers, moving eyes, and raising eyebrows, and of course that was the dream puppet for me.
Right.
I had a semi-pro figure that I got from Mayhair. That I was using, but again, it was I think it was like a Danny O'Day doll that was painted with freckles and had real hair, and they had made it so his eyes moved and his eyebrows moved. But I needed a professional puppet, so my mother, she sent this guy money for 3 years until she was able to afford it to pay him off, and then she gave him to me on my 18th birthday. And that character went through many different personas. At one point, he had a mohawk, and another point. And I think I named him Spud. Another time he was Johnny Rebel. He was a rock singer, and he had long hair and leather. And then the way I came up, it's so funny how many of the different characters. Like I have a character named Monte Carlo, and he's a lounge singer, and I named him after obviously the Monte Carlo resort here in Vegas because it sounds very Vegasy. But of course, Jeff Dunham had a character named Monty. And he has a character named Walter, and my Walter was actually originally a political puppet, and I named him after Walter Mondale, and I would do political jokes back in the 80s when Walter Mondale, a lot of people are too young to even remember, but he ran against Ronald Reagan, and so I was doing these political jokes, and he was bald, and his name was Walter Airedale because it sounded like Walter Mondale. And then, and this was back in the 80s before I'd ever even heard of Jeff Dunham's Walter. I didn't even know if he had the Walter that he has now. And then when I started my country band, Texas the Band, I thought I would make him into a country singer, and I put a little cowboy hat on him and a country outfit, and I put a T between the Walter and Airedale. And so Walter T. Airedale sounded very country to me, and he became the country singer. And since then, that was probably the late 80s, maybe 88 or 89 when he became Walter T. Airedale, and he kept that character. I typically don't change characters, but it was a long time for me to to really find that right character. And I want to make sure ventriloquists know there's nothing at all wrong with changing a character. If you have a character that's not working, feel free to change the character of that. Walter T. Airedale went through 10 different characters before I finally settled on what I wanted him to be. Same thing with Maynard Tompkins, the Elvis impersonator. When I didn't even name him Maynard at first, I had several other names and several other characters before I finally came up with the idea of an Elvis impersonator character who doesn't know any Elvis songs, And to me, that was just hilarious. That was so funny of an Elvis impersonator that doesn't know Elvis songs and stutters and is kind of silly.
It's funny.
And so as you're creating characters, you don't have to be stuck. These are inanimate objects. They're puppets. They don't have feelings. The only feelings they have are the ones you're putting into them. So if you have a character, I remember watching Dumbstruck. I just watched that the other day with some friends of mine, which I love. I absolutely love that movie because have you seen the movie Dumbstruck?
Yeah, it's on Netflix, and I watched it before convention. It's a great thing to rev up to it,
Yeah, it's a fun thing, and it really shows different ventriloquists in different levels of their life. And I can't remember her name, but the lady that's in there that has it, and she says, "Oh, it's so hard. It's like a child." And it's like, well, I've never felt that way. It's like my puppets are not my children. They're characters that I have created them. And if I want to evolve their character or change their character, that is totally up to me. And I'm not criticizing her. I mean, it's just different for everybody. If somebody feels like their puppets are their children, that's fine. I just think that's a little strange. It's certainly not for me. I just want what works. If something works better, with a character, I have no problem. But I also, at the same time, I want to caution that you don't have characters going all over the place. Obviously you can't have a little boy character that's telling ex-wife jokes.
Right.
So you have to make sure that it stays within that character. But, feel free to play around with the character until you finally find that. And then now once I do find that character, once I find and I say this is the character of this particular puppet, then it stays. And it's like Walter T. Airedale is a country singer. He'll always be a country singer. Maynard Tompkins is always going to be that country bumpkin Elvis impersonator that just can't seem to ever learn any Elvis songs,
Yeah.
And those, so once but feel free to play around and, it took me years to find Walter's character. Same thing with Maynard. It took me years to find his character. And then once you have it, then you just nail it down. And then it's much easier to write for those characters.
Yes, and America got to, and we certainly did, but I believe all of America got to watch you create a character right in front of them, and that's Winston. From the little Winston you used and really helped you win America's Got Talent to the Winston that you have now in your Las Vegas show. Can you talk a little bit about the evolution of the design of the physical puppet?
Yeah, with Winston, it was completely an accident. They say that sometimes what's the statement I'm looking for? Well, sometimes genius is the result of necessity. You can't. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, it's amazing. I've had so many people say it's just genius that you have a turtle impersonating a frog. Well, that wasn't. It was not genius. It was just happenstance. Because what happened was I got on America's Got Talent, and I called and I did this Kermit the Frog impression, and I did What a Wonderful World with Kermit singing with Louis Armstrong. And so I'm assuming, I'm thinking, man, this is a great bit. I feel like this is going to be one of those guarantees to get me through. People are going to love this. And I called up the Muppets and I said, is it okay if I do Kermit? And they said, absolutely not. There's only one Muppet. There's only one Kermit. Steve Whitmire, he's the only one. It was Jim Henson before that. When Jim Henson passed away, one Muppet, one voice. That's it, And so I was crushed. I'm thinking, and I understood, though. I mean, I wasn't like angry with them or resentful. I was like, well, I get it, but okay, so what am I going to do now? So I'm thinking, okay, what if I got a puppet that impersonated Kermit? And so I'm thinking, okay, it's got to be, a frog and I obviously don't want it to be a frog because Kermit's a frog. So what if I get another reptile? I'm thinking lizard, snake, anything. So I really went online and started looking for puppets that were reptilian or, and so I finally saw this little turtle puppet. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. So I had a friend of mine who had a toy store that sold puppets, and sure enough, they were able to find that puppet. They bought it, overnighted him to me, and when I opened the box, for some reason, the name Winston, I had just met earlier a little miniature donkey at a relative's house named Winston, and I thought that was the cutest name, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's Winston, and then I named him the impersonating turtle because he was going to be impersonating the frog, Kermit. And immediately his character, this cuteness came out. And, a lot of people are like, oh, man, I like the old Winston. Why'd you change it? Well, because I got into legal trouble. I actually got sued by the company that made that puppet for using him on America's Got Talent. Yeah. And so I highly, highly, highly warn anyone, if you're going to go on a television show, contact the makers of that puppet and get writing that it's okay and you have permission to do that. Because, if you ever do hit it big, God forbid that you hit it big and have the kind of legal trouble. I have had lawsuits you cannot believe out the wazoo because I wasn't prepared. I didn't know. I mean, I know Jeff Dunham does, and he's mentioned all of his characters are original and he makes them, and it's very important. But, geez, I was a guy who was playing schools. I didn't know anything about this. I just figured once I bought the puppet, I was buying the rights, but that is absolutely not true. You have to get written permission to use a puppet when you go on a national television show. So please take my advice. So what I did was I went through some different incarnations, and I wanted to create the idea of behind Winston was that he had to be cuddly. I felt like he had to be this cute, sweet, cuddly character. And so I had Steve Axtell make me one, and he did a fantastic job, but it just didn't have the cuddle factor. It just wasn't right. So I eventually settled. I went to a group called Puppet Heap, and they're very expensive. And I don't mind telling they're around $15,000 a puppet, which is a lot, but when you're performing at the Mirage and you have a $100 million contract, you can afford $15,000 for a puppet, yeah. And I do not have Jeff Dunham's talent for creation. I can barely draw a stick figure. And if I do, I can't draw the same stick figure twice. I'm horrible with drawing, but I can create. So what I did was I called up Puppet Heap, and I would say, and they're the same company that works with a lot of Jim Henson characters and things like this. Mm-hmm. And I said, I need this turtle character, but he's got to be super cute and he's got to be just really cuddly. And I want him to just be, he's the essence of cuteness because that's what Winston's all about. And so they sent me, tons and tons of different drawings, and I would just kind of say, I love this. His neck is a little too long, or we need to do this or what, and I would just kind of guide them. And then we finally settled on the final that we wanted Winston to be. In fact, if you get the guide, not the guide, but the book that comes, when you come to my show at the Mirage, you can buy what do they call them when you go in and you get it has pictures of me and talks about the show.
The program?
It actually shows the program. Yes, I'm having a hard time remembering things because I didn't get much sleep last night. My wife and I had to get up very early this morning, so I'm very, very tired. But yes, the program, and I'm not sure, but I think you might be able to order those on my website. If not, I'll talk to my people and see if we can't get those. But it actually says the creation of a puppet, and it shows the different drawings, the early drawings, and how we actually created, and some pictures of Winston as he was being created and sculpted. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's really cool. What was you talked earlier about some of your aha moments throughout your career. What was the aha moment that you realized you could do those impressions without moving your mouth, with doing the technique of ventriloquism?
Well, there was never an aha moment for being able to do it because I was always able to do it. Right. I had a lion puppet when I was young that I used to do a Michael Jackson. I used to sing like Michael Jackson when I was 11 and 12, and I called him Jackal Mikeson, and he was this little puppet. So I was always able to do it, and at times in church I would have my puppet come out and sing a Christian song like an Amy Grant song or a Michael W. Smith song, and then it was the odd thing about it was that it came so easily for me that I just felt like that it wasn't that big of a deal. So I didn't understand. And so the aha moment for me was not wow, I can do this, the aha moment for me was, wow, people are really going to like this. And I had this band, Texas, a band for 15 years, and I would pull out a character, and he would sing a Dwight Yoakam song, and I would do a duet with him where he would sing like Dwight Yoakam, and I would do Buck Owens, and then I did this regularly throughout Texas, the band, but it just never said, nothing ever clicked in me that said, wow, people are going to just eat this kind of stuff up, until I went and saw an impressionist. His name is Danny Gans, and he was performing at the Mirage on the very stage that is now my stage. And I'm sitting there, and he's going from one singing impression to another. And I'm watching the crowd, and the crowd is going crazy. They're loving this guy. And I'm thinking, well, I can do this. But obviously, if I did it just like him, then I would just be a cheap knockoff, and I didn't want to do that.
Right.
So I'm going, okay, well, I can do it without moving my lips. So what if I just have my puppets do the impressions? I kind of put together a ventriloquism show where I do these impressions, kind of like what Danny Gans was doing, except that, I'll write these funny routines and I'll have the puppets do it. And I'm telling you, never in a million years did I think it was going to be as successful as it was, as it is. I just figured it was going to be a nice little novelty that was going to get me more shows. And so what I did was I went and I did a show, and in this show, when I did this show, I just kind of pulled it out of my hat. I was doing some impressions in the show, and so I had an iPod hooked up to the sound system, and I was doing a little corporate party with maybe 50 people, and there was I had my iPod, and I had several songs that I would do, Michael Jackson, and I would sing them by myself. And I had Garth Brooks, Friends in Low Places, and so I had Maynard just right there in the middle of this paid show where I'm getting paid to do. I had Maynard sing Garth Brooks, and afterwards, people went nuts. They were like, oh my gosh, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. So I realized that people were very fascinated by this. So I went home and I really worked hard for about 6 straight months, and I rewrote my entire show so that every single puppet did impressions of singers. And instead of just being a normal ventriloquist, I would say, oh, my next guest is from, I always looked at myself as a talk show host. And let me say to other ventriloquists, that's a very good way for you to look at yourself. Don't look at yourself as a ventriloquist, because if you're thinking of yourself as a ventriloquist, people are never going to believe that puppet is real. And the beauty of the illusion of ventriloquism is that you are creating life where life doesn't exist. And you have to believe that they're real if you want the audience to believe they're real. Not literally, but I'm saying you have to act like they're real. And so I always looked at myself as a talk show host. So when I introduce my characters, they all have backstories. They all have, they're as if they're real people. I say, my next guest plays bars all over the country. He's a lounge singer. He's been doing this for the last 50 years, and he's, Monte Carlo. So I make sure that people realize that these are real people. These are real characters that have real lives, and they're just happening to stop by my show to do a performance. And so it was, once I realized I started doing this, it was very interesting because I was playing small, tiny little fairs, and they would stick me over next to the petting zoo or next to the arcade where there's a lot of, or next to the Midway where there's a lot of noise. And then suddenly, once I was doing all impressions, things really changed for me, because all of a sudden, instead of having, 10 people and 20 people at my shows, I would fill up the stands, and then they would be standing 8 and 9 and 10 and 20 back,
Wow,
waiting to see what the next impression was going to be. And I realized, boy, this is really something. People are liking this stuff, And before I did this, every time I would switch to a puppet, I would lose my entire crowd. So I would have 10 or 15 people there, and then I would say, okay, and then I would put the puppet up, and everybody would get up and leave, and I would bring out another puppet, and then I would have to bring in a whole new crowd. But once I started doing all the impressions, then I noticed that people stayed because they were fascinated. They wanted to see what the next impression was going to be, what the next puppet was going to do. And now I never thought I would win America's Got Talent. I figured I was going to get on and it was going to make it easier for me to book schools and fairs, and that was my only intention. I mean, and then, I wanted to work my way up to playing Vegas because I felt like that was kind of the sweet gig. And I had no idea that within 2 months of winning, I would have a regular headlining gig at the Hilton, and then certainly never thought I would sign a multi-million-dollar, multi-year deal at the Mirage. that wasn't even in the realm of my possibility in my head. I thought it was going to be a 10 or 15 year process. So
Yes, and this new road show that you do really kind of touches on your journey and talks about how hard work and it really gets you to these places you can just dream of, and so that's why you're an inspiration to so many people, Mr. Fader. Is just that's that your story is an inspiration. And last thing, I know we have about a half hour was what we planned. So the last question I want to leave with is, what would you like to see from this generation learning the art form as they come up and work as you did?
what I really, really want to see, and what I hope that I am encouraging other people, is quality, because quality will always sell. It's so funny here in Vegas. I look around, and people think that spectacle is what people want to see. So they feel like if you don't have a cast of thousands or a cast of 150, and you've got people, swinging on ropes and doing things, and it's like, yeah, that's all great and everything, but every show doesn't have that. Bette Midler came out and did this unbelievable show, and she had dozens of people in the cast, and she had these humongous sets. And afterwards, I talked to her, and I said, so, what do you think? She said, oh, my gosh, I can't tell you. I don't ever want to play Vegas again because it was too much work. And I'm sitting there thinking, it's ridiculous, because I would pay to see Bette just stand up there and sing songs,
Right.
because it's quality. It's to sing songs and tell jokes. Same thing with Elton John. He has all of these gigantic inflatables and humongous, all this stuff going on everywhere. And it's like, all you got to do is get a piano and sing the songs that we all love. It's the same thing. If you're good, people will pay to see you. If you're good, if you do quality material and you're a quality ventriloquist, you will be successful. Now, you may not find the kind of success that myself and Jeff Dunham has. I mean, and look, I realize that I don't understand why it has happened. I mean, I did put a lot of time into it. 32 years of hard work, and, paying my dues, and 25 years of travel on the road, of playing the absolute worst places you can possibly imagine, all over the country. So, yeah, I paid my dues. But a lot of people pay their dues and never actually get this. So it was definitely, the universe kind of came together in a perfect storm of to create what happened to me. Same thing with Jeff Dunham. There's a lot of ventriloquists that are just as talented as him that will never find the success that he has. But at the same time, and it's like I said in my road show, that finding contentment, and if you are able to make a living as a ventriloquist, even if you never find the phenomenal success, if you can find that happiness and contentment, that's really kind of the key. And if you're good, and if you're funny, and if you put quality material out there, you can make a living doing this. And that's what I hope people take from it. I hope people, instead of looking and saying, wow, I want to get rich and famous, I hope people look and say, I want to be the best. I want to be as good as I possibly can be. And if it happens, yay. And if not, man, you can still impress the heck out of people, and you can still make a mark on yours. There was one of the ventriloquists that was there that actually won the Clinton Detweiler Scholarship that my wife and I sponsor every year, is Christopher Ortiz. And he saw me at the Iowa State Fair before I ever won America's Got Talent. And it inspired him to become a ventriloquist. And one of the reasons why he won this year was because when he first started, he was terrible. I mean, I was just looking and saying, this poor kid, I got to see him he did a little show for me. And I'm like, this poor kid. And then when he sent his audition piece for me, I realized that guy has worked his butt off. And he's got funny material, and he's developed a real rapport with his puppet. And his lip movement can use some work, but he's young, and he's improved so much. And that, to me, is the key. The key is get better, get good at what you do, put out quality material that's funny, and I'm telling you, you will be a success. And that's what I hope. I hope that next generation, when I'm sitting on the couch retired and I'm watching on television and I see that next fantastic ventriloquist, and I go, wow, I just would love to know that I somehow had an influence on that person, whoever he or she may be.
Well, Terry Fator, you are so gracious to be here with us, and I thank you very, very much for your time.
Mm. It's such a pleasure, and I do hope that that, to see that next crop of ventriloquists come out there, and I just am so proud to be a part of the event community. And again, I want to reiterate, if you do get a chance to come out to any of my shows, please somehow get in touch with us. Just go to terryfator.com. You can contact us through there. Let them know that you're a ventriloquist, because I have standing orders to meet all the ventriloquists, any ventriloquist that comes to my show.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I truly, truly hope you guys enjoyed listening to that as much as I enjoyed putting it together for you guys. That was such a blast, and I'm honored he came on here. As Terry mentioned, he showed us a video of him writing a routine with his comedy writing staff during his Vent Haven workshop. He came out on stage with Axtel's brand new alien character and did the routine he wrote. Then he played a really cool 30-minute video that showed the team writing the routine. I think a lot of us wanted to find Mark Waid and be like, hey, can we buy that? But wouldn't you know it, a few days after Vent Haven, Steve Axtel uploaded the video. Go to YouTube and search for it. I'm sure if you search Terry Fator, Steve Axtel, comedy writing, you'll find it. It has wonderful information, indispensable, invaluable, just fantastic, chock full of stuff. And if I may say, what he said here today on the podcast really complements what is said in that video and vice versa. So it's some great information. Go see Terry's Roadshow if you can. It's fantastic. Go see his Vegas show if you can. Us East Coasters aren't so lucky, but if you're out there, go see it. It's the hottest ticket in town. Go to terryfator.com, buy stuff from the store, like him on Facebook. I can't plug him enough for coming on here. I'm so grateful. And speaking of Steve Axtel, the character creator extraordinaire, friend to many ventriloquists, and owner of Axtel Expressions, will be with us next week. And while you guys are listening to that next week, I will be on vacation in Branson, Missouri. Why am I telling you guys this? Well, because hopefully while I'm down there, I'll be getting some stuff on location. And the following week when I get back, I'll fill you in on my trip. And I'll tell you when to look out for some of the stuff I will hopefully be getting down there. And that's it for us this week. Write to us. Take charge of your podcast. I'm serious, guys. It's enough for me to just blabble behind a microphone, interview people. I want to know what you guys want to hear. If you have questions that would apply to any guest, or you want to hear there's a specific guest you want to hear, or there's a specific topic you want to hear, send them our way. This is your podcast. I want to hear from you. This is all of us together. Please participate. We'd love to hear your thoughts on all of our topics, and send them to ventriloquismweekly@gmail.com. That's ventriloquismweekly@gmail.com. All of our episodes are available to download on iTunes. You can also listen and follow us on our hosting site. It's kind of like a Facebook for podcasts. That's ventriloquismweekly.podomatic.com. That's ventriloquismweekly.podomatic.com. I post statuses. I give little updates. I throw out little hints. I let you know about production schedule stuff. So take a look at that hosting site. So for now, signing off for Ventriloquism Weekly, I'm Matt Bailey, reminding all you vents out there to keep talking for two.